You're listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. Divya, for those who haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
My name is Divya Yerraguntla. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years. Pharma is not just my passion, but it's also something I care very deeply about. I've had multiple family members go through different states of diseases, and I feel this is the one way we can really contribute. I have more expertise on commercialization of products. I got the opportunity to launch 32 products across 11 markets, 9 therapeutic areas, which has been a great journey.
You have launched a ton of products. And from what I've read of you, there's maybe 3 larger ones that you have done. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Even though you've said, you've been involved in 30-some product launches? Why do you focus on those 3? Are those the ones that have made it? Or why do those get the attention in your LinkedIn profile, those 3?
Because they made more than $1 billion in sales.
Oh, it's a profit game, huh? So those are the big ones.
So I have to make one thing very clear. When you are part of a launch, every product is your baby. So if you had to ask me, were these 3 the most important? No. Were these the 3 products that taught me the most? No. Every launch teaches you something, no matter how big or small. So the only reason they're highlighted out there is because for the world, they mean something.
When you had the chance to launch those, should these have been the 3 big ones, or were there any surprises, or were there any that didn't go that maybe should have been 4 big ones, or were these 3 the ones that were going to be the focus?
So there were supposed to be 5 big ones, if I have to count. 3 made it big, 2 did not.
Don't tell anybody.
No, I'm not going to name names, so nobody should feel bad. But there were 2 that did not do as well as expected. And that's pretty normal because in pharmaceutical industry, I think we compete to an extent that no other industry sometimes has to. Especially in some of the therapeutic areas, there's so many companies investing, there's so many innovative products coming. You expect a product to do well, but then right before you launch, there might be a competitor that has launched another product, which is really, really good with really awesome data. Then you may not reach your forecast that you had anticipated. So it happens, but most of the time, they're pretty accurate. Because they know what the market you're launching into, what to expect, how many patients will we be able to help. So those numbers are pretty right, but there definitely are sometimes misses. But it's sometimes not just in your hands, it's all the external factors playing into how your product does.
It was fascinating watching the launch of Sir Richard Branson's spaceship yesterday. He's in the race with Elon Musk, and then Bezos got a little bit perturbed, and he chimed in and says, well, you're not really going to space, you're going to subspace and that kind of stuff. But I told one of my kids this yesterday. It's like, that's how inventions have been all through time, where it's not like Edison all of a sudden just invented a light bulb out of the blue. The state of the economy was such that light bulbs were kind of being worked on by 3 or 4 different kind of companies, and same with, across time, same with flight and same with all kinds of things. I mean, rarely has there just been recently in the last 100 years, just an invention that kind of came up on its own. Everybody was kind of had common knowledge, and then kind of all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 people competing against each other. So when you talk about those drugs that you were bringing up, I imagine that's going on too, right? It's not like all of a sudden a drug gets released that no one's thought of using it before for a cure. There's probably a couple or a few companies at least working on similar things. And is that what happened when a competitor comes out maybe at the same time?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. There are multiple companies trying to break through, right, the barriers, and usually companies invest, and it is a lot of investment. They usually invest in areas where there is unmet need. You feel the patients don't have all the great options that they could have, and you have something that you could provide as an option. That's when you invest that kind of money. So definitely there are multiple companies working at any given time in any therapeutic area to cure a certain disease. So that's a given. Sometimes what happens is based on the data, you might get expedited approval. So you were expecting somebody to launch a year after you would. You could get delayed. That happens all the time. You may get a complete response letter, which in layman's term is instead of getting approval from FDA, they're telling you, no, you can't launch. You have to wait 2, 3, 4 years with some restrictions. You either have to do a post-marketing study or you have to do a pre-marketing study or cardiovascular study. It can be n number of reasons why they would ask you not to launch and give you a complete response letter. So you might get delayed. On the flip side, somebody else might have great data and get an expedited approval. So instead of launching a year later, suddenly now they're in a position to file now and to launch earlier than their anticipated launch date. So it works both ways. Many factors play into why 2 separate launches that had some lag now suddenly are either overlapping or somebody actually went ahead of you.
Are those ever surprises to you? I don't mean the surprise that someone else got to go quicker, but are they surprises that, oh, this company's working on this, I didn't know that? Or does the FDA make those things public and so kind of where you are in the launch sequence? It's not secret, I imagine.
FDA is a black hole. You don't know what's happening in there.
Oh, you don't know?
No. But then each company has a team called competitive intelligence team. These guys are awesome. They're like detectives, right?
You have spies for the other companies.
No, it's not spy. It's all public data. You have publications coming out on people's clinical trials. You can go to fdaclinicaltrials.gov site. You can see who's running what trials and what disease state. So that's not a secret.
Gotcha.
But then these people kind of go out and see what kind of data is coming out. Based on that, you can make some assumptions. Okay, data is great. They might get approval sooner. Or, if they actually start saying, they're looking for positions out there, they're trying to hire, then there's some action happening. So they have some information that clearly you don't, and you may never have. But it's all these little feelers. So these CI teams actually help us a lot in determining what else is happening in the landscape. And a lot of times when you start planning for a product, that's what you do. A lot of market research teams help you. Market analytics teams, they come in and they give you a situational analysis, which is one word for a huge document. They work hours on it. What it tells you is what's the landscape, how many more companies are working on products in this area, what they think is the timelines for them. So they give you a view of what's coming in. So you can see what marketplace you're going to launch into. What is it that you will have to face? And you, of course, do scenario planning. Any good launch team does scenario planning. So you plan for it to say, okay, if this happens, plan A. If this happens, plan B. And I'll tell you from experience, there are a couple of products where we had to go to plan F and H. I'm just glad it never got to plan Z. But there are scenarios when things just keep happening. And I think that's the most exciting part of working on a launch. You ask anybody who's ever launched a product, the adrenaline rush when you see things happening on the fly, things not working, and how you come with innovative solutions. And you get to work with extremely intelligent, smart teams because they are the ones thinking on their feet. So it's fun.
It reminds me of the joke with the hemorrhoidal ointment preparation H. I would sure hate to be the guy that had to test preparation A through G. So Divya, are those, I'm going to call them spies. Are those spies, are they employed by the drug company, or are those usually outside firms that are specializing in that?
It depends. Some of the big firms, of course, have their own CIs, right? CI teams that will actually work with them. And then some smaller companies usually outsource that. So there are agencies that do it for you. Even the bigger pharma companies, they also use other smaller firms because you can't be everywhere. Right. They also go to conferences. They will see what else is being presented, how the booth is. You get a lot of different kinds of information through them. But they're critical They are so critical, and every company has it, whether it's in-house or whether it's some other agency doing it for you, but they have it. Typically, it depends on the size of the company.
And I imagine some of the companies, they want some of the information to come out right for the shareholders. They want to say, hey, we're working on this, but you don't want to give too much away, but they probably want to keep the press going, right?
See, that's the thing. All of this information, right? Like, because to your point, it's like a need to know basis, but at the same time, they do want to create the excitement, right?
Yeah, you got to let some secrets out.
So like, how much do you share? But those investor reports are like if you are in that area, that's your gold mine because it gives you so much information, and that's credible information because you do not just share something with the investors that's not true.
I'm sure it's illegal. Plus, you don't want the ramifications of someone coming back and saying, where did this information come from?
Yeah. No, so I think that's a great source. But just like the investor report, they go through multiple sources. And now that I'm working for Syneos, I see this, like there are so many data sources that they sieve through, they look through. It's incredible how much data is out there these days. And you know this more than anybody, right? It is everywhere, especially in pharmaceutical. Like there is so much data, clinical data, patient data, you have the publication data. It's like data is everywhere. How best we use it and mine it, I think is going to be the next wave. Instead of
picking up on this gossip and just saying, oh, that's interesting, that must mean this. They turn that data almost into a science more.
Yeah, it's like and I know it's a buzzword, AI and ML, artificial intelligence, machine learning. It is a buzzword today. Not a lot of companies have really adopted it the way we could. Some industries have, we haven't. But then if you look at it, we have so much data that we can make some models and see what happens, test those models, and really apply that into the new data coming in. We have that opportunity. But I guess on the flip side, pharma is so constrained by compliance. We have so many constraints on it. So sometimes it's not easy to catch up. There is a lot of technology out there that can help, but how do you adapt it? All the validation rules, all of the technology, the compliance, the legal ramifications. By the time you go through all these filters, there is very little you can really do.
With nearly 5 blockbusters and 3 at least to your name, when this happened, were you part of a company that specialized in launches like these? Manufacturers would say, okay, we're getting ready for launch, let's hire Divya and her firm. Or were you part of the firm that actually invented these from square one?
So I was part of the firms that actually developed the drugs.
You were?
Yeah. So so I was part of the company that was launching their own products. I was an employee of that company.
Oh.
But now what I do, so in the last 6 months, I moved jobs. So now I'm part of Syneos Health. What Syneos does is they actually work with smaller companies and mid-sized big pharma companies that need these services. But then again, what I did in my past was mostly commercialization. Now I'm a part of a team that actually does everything from clinical all the way to commercialization, which is so awesome because it's like end to end, not just one piece of it or the middle piece, but you start from the very beginning and stay with the product all the way. The only difference is these are not Syneos products. So the product is not developed by Syneos, but they stay end to end. So that's the difference in the opportunity. So until January of this year, I was always on the other side with the company that was manufacturing the product. Now I'm on the other side, which is exciting to see the other side, to see how things are done, and very smart people. So a lot of learning, a lot of excitement.
Why didn't the companies that you worked for, the manufacturers, why did they not hire somebody like Syneos to say, all right, we've got this concoction pretty well set here. Let's hire now a marketing company or someone to take it the rest of the way. They didn't need that because they were big enough to have their own part of the business to hire someone like you who did that because they were big enough. And these companies now that Syneos has maybe aren't big enough to have someone as skilled and talented as you in their company.
So it's a combination of both. Many big companies also hire companies to help them because they may have like a small team and they need additional support, and they may hire agencies to help them with this. So they will have their own launch teams and they would hire external help to supplement wherever they have gaps. That happens all the time. Then some companies actually have the entire operations within, which has been mostly my experience. And the reason for that, at least the way we have looked at it, is this: when you know you're going to launch multiple products, and when you know that you would have learnings, having those critical relationships with the stakeholders, understanding what we can do right the next time, all of that knowledge, if it stays in-house, you're not losing it. When you outsource that, all of that learning, every launch will be a new learning for some company or the same company. Even if you outsource, you're not guaranteed the same team for every product, right? So there's always some learnings that are kind of, there is a knowledge drain when that happens. When it's in-house, you don't have that. So sometimes it's a combination. But that said, many a times you also hire outside agencies because you may have one or two people working in that capacity within the team, but some of the launches need so much more support, so much more help. So they would hire somebody else as well.
When you did these 32 launches, that had to be with your new agency.
No, the 32 launches were on the industry side. I was an employee for those companies, so that's all their credit. One of the companies I worked for also had some licensing where they launched. They had their own products as well as they bought some products. So it's a combination. So they were all their own products.
When you were in the industry working for those companies, how many were they averaging a year?
So some of the bigger companies average less because their launches are big. So they do one every 2 years. Sometimes they may have an overlap. I have launched 2 big products within 6 months of each other. That also happens. But some of the smaller and upcoming mid-sized companies launch a lot more, especially if you're building your portfolio. You buy products, you manufacture some on your own, you license some. So then you have more volume of launches in that case.
You have got a mathematics degree.
I do.
And a marketing degree.
Yes.
And besides that, you're also an artist. You're a musician.
Yes.
Okay. In your job with these companies, was it strictly mathematics? I mean, could an old fart like me do it because it's very methodical? Or I'm thinking with your marketing and being an artist, that there's more to it than just the methodical launch. Where does the art come into this? Because obviously some fail. We've talked about that. And they don't just fail because there's been a competitor coming up. There's other reasons too. So where could you screw up?
Okay, so I see that as 2 questions. So the first one, I can say, the creative part. How does really creativity help you in launching a product?
Yes.
So the math part is more the logical piece of it. You kind of want to make sure everything adds up, which helps you tie out the loose ends. I think the most important things that helped me doing these jobs over the years has been my PMP, which was Project Management Professional, which I got in 2004, which actually teaches you the processes, the project management, how to do workshops, how to facilitate, how to negotiate, which I think was important, which also was part of my MBA. To a certain extent, 2 separate aspects. PMP really is very, very process oriented, and it gives you templates, it gives you methodologies to look at. My marketing degree, on the other hand, really teaches you how to look at it from the creative aspect of it, how to kind of move things along and still make it impactful for the end customer. So those 2 blended in really nice. My music background, I think the one thing if you're in any of the arts, whether it be music, dance, whatever, you realize you never stop learning. Anything you do, you want to improve yourself the next time. And I think that attitude is much stronger in creative people than anybody else, because you always want to be the better version of yourself the next time around. And I think that attitude really helps when you're doing something at this scale, cross-functionally for an organization with so much budget, to say, where could we have done better? What are the things we should learn? How do we improve ourselves? And I think that having the data, looking at what went wrong in a very pragmatic way. It's not the blame game, but it's really understanding really for the product, what could we have done to make it a bigger success? How could we have reached more patients? How could we have done better? And taking those learnings and applying it, making it into a process and applying it repetitively is, I think, where the value is. So for me, all of the things I learned, whether it be math, whether it be, an MBA or my music, it all converges really well in what I do.
PMP certification, what does that stand for?
Project Management Professional.
You mentioned a few methods in there. What were those you mentioned?
So you have different kinds of methodologies. You have agile methodology, you have waterfall methodologies. So you have multiple methodologies in how to do things. Then you have, when you facilitate workshop,
like focus groups?
Yeah, like focus groups. You would have cross-functional workshops to strategize, right? What do we want to do for the product? How do we want to build the strategy? Then you facilitate these workshops with all these different functions. You'll have people from marketing, from medical, from market access, from legal, from regulatory, all these functions that come together for a launch. When you facilitate, they all have their own little jargons, their own language. How do you speak in a way that everybody understands what we want to do and how can we achieve the common goal? Setting those up. Pre-launch, you also plan to say, okay, who needs what by when, right? You have to plan the entire thing. This is like a movie production, which scene comes after what scene? What's the dependency?
Yeah.
What are the red threads? If you are on a horse in a blue t-shirt and you get down the horse in the next scene, you can't be wearing a red t-shirt,
Sure.
It has to be a blue t-shirt. So the launch team literally maintains that continuity. What's the dependency? If this happens, these are the 3 teams that need something from them. Because it's like a constant chain of events. You hand off something you make and the other person picks it up from there and then does their own thing. Because at the end of the day, it's the same product, no matter which team is touching it.
When you were talking pre-stuff, I'm kind of having my marketing hat on, thinking about like what kind of outside people and outside focus groups you're working on. But what I'm hearing from you is that's a part of this, but you're also working with all of the internal, maybe not working at the company, but at least for the company. You're working with everybody.
Pre-launch, we call something like a summit. Summit is where you bring all the teams. You basically work with each team to say, what are the, key things you need to do to make this product, to launch this product. And then you would take that list and then you would put the entire lists out there and then you would look at what's the dependency. If somebody says, let's say there's a document that marketing is putting together and then medical says, I need to provide input into that document, right? Or I have something that will come before they get to that piece. Then you want to make sure that marketing knows to wait until medical is done, so that they can take that as their input. So you kind of have to map all of that out. And that's done in a summit. And these are all planning sessions. So this is really planning and strategy. You decide, okay, what kind of physicians you'll go after, how many areas you would have, how many territories. All of that is part of the planning and strategy.
What might a group do out of order that said, you should have waited for this to happen?
A good example would be, the first thing is medical team comes up with a clinical deck to say, what is the product about? What are the benefits and what is the data showing? So that's your first thing. So once you have that, usually the marketing team would take that and look at it because that's medically accurate to say,
Gotcha.
Okay, these are the things we can talk about. And then they will go out, research, come up with their key messages. Once they have their key messages and you have the clinical deck, market access teams would look at what the commercial key messages are and then try to align with that. So when they go out to payers, it's speaking the same language, at least in the same
Gotcha.
area. So you have to share all these documents so there is a red thread throughout. So the minute, let's say somebody else goes out and they make their messaging without looking at the clinical deck, or sometimes, the pair materials is produced without looking at the commercial messaging, they might be a little bit off. And that's a problem. not that it cannot be fixed, but sometimes given the time and the money it takes to fix things, it just eats into your time to prepare for other things which are critical for launch.
It wouldn't be as big as something like an age group, but it could be something like a percentage of something. It's very detailed, but you have to have it. It's got to be very detailed.
And you should all align. What is it that you really want this product to say? Like sometimes it may be, if it's a cancer product, let's say, and the other therapies out there are all injectables. They have to take IV injection or something, and your product is just a tablet you can eat. And if we all as a team agree, that's a big differentiator, because eating a tablet is very different than taking an IV or an injection all the time. Then you can say, okay, we are all going to say this is what is important for our product. And that way, when you align on that as a strategy and you go out, you're all working off of the same assumptions.
After decisions like that, is that where like a marketing focus group would come in, where you say, okay, we think this is our message. Now we're going to sit down with the focus group and say, hey, how important is this that this is chewable versus this, or grape flavored versus this or something? That's where then you take that and then you come back and say, hey, no one gives a crap about this, or they wish it was this kind of thing. And maybe it doesn't change the product, but it changes your message, the important things about that product.
Yeah, I've seen it done both ways. You first think what's important, you go out, do research. I've also seen it where the marketing team would actually go out and do some initial research and come back and say, these 3 things stood out. Now, what do we want to align towards? And then because all the teams have to agree, so they'll say just based on, let's say you do a HCP research, which is a healthcare professional research versus a patient research. So they can say, okay, patients prefer that it's a tablet, and HCP prefers the fact that it's, let's say, once a month instead of every other week.
Right. And they don't really care if it's a tablet or this or that, but the other group does, but they don't care about the month.
Exactly. So now as a team, you should be aligned to say, okay, what is it that we want to talk about? So it can be done both ways.
How long does all that take? I mean, this doesn't come together in an afternoon, but hopefully it's not 10 years. All right, go find this and come back. How long are we talking?
So usually you start launch prep anywhere 24 months to 18 months before the anticipated launch. Anticipated launch is usually 10 to 12 months from the time you file for the product with FDA. So let's say you want to file for a product a year from today, because you have the data, you're in phase 3, you'll get there in a year. Companies start thinking about having a launch team in place now or within the next 6 months. So by the time you file, your launch team should be in place for at least 6 months.
Working together, different things.
Working on different things, yeah. Because it is a lot of planning, it is a lot of coordination, and a lot of things have to come together. And many a times you want to create the awareness for your product.
A little buzz for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not going to go to publications and read publications, scientific publications every other day for fun. No, I don't.
You slackers might not do it, but I do.
Of course you do. Hey, more power to you. So you need to create that buzz, at least not at my level, but at least with the physicians to say, hey, our data is coming out. It's looking very promising and we want to bring this product out. You can engage them in different ways, but you also want to get the word out. You can't talk about the product, but you can talk about the clinical aspects of it. That's why the publications are so important. You start publishing your data in these medical conferences, so that people at least become aware that there is a molecule that has a significant advantage over what's out there right now.
Oh, I bet there's a lot of rules there where you can talk about the molecule maybe, but I imagine you can't say what it is and name it and all that stuff. I bet there's a ton of rules.
Yeah, you can't pre-promote. Name is not finalized until you get the final approval from FDA. So you don't know yourself what the name's going to be. You know what you submitted, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to submit, secondary names and everything. So you have submitted 2 or 3 names to them, but you don't know what the approval will come back with.
Is there a master program that a lot of the drug companies use that keep all this information sorted? I mean, is it just like a database, or is there a program that drug companies use to follow all this?
There are many databases and there are many people within the company. That's their job to track. Like the regulatory teams make all the filing. They make sure they're getting all the data from their clinical teams so that accuracy is right. You have statisticians working through all the numbers, getting you the percentages, because there's just so much that goes on there. So it's a team effort. It's huge teams. They have specialists to do all of this. There's no one person or one system that can do everything. It's a combination.
There's no name brand program that captures all this. It's just too big. There's just too many things going on.
It's too many things. It's too many things, too many variables that they have to track. And they're all tracked in different systems. So there's no one system.
When do you know and how do you know that a product is not the success you wanted it to be?
Right after launch, don't make it to their estimated forecast. And forecast is like your guiding beam, right? What did you expect it to do in the first 6 months versus what it is doing? Is telling you, because if you don't set that trajectory, the curve in the beginning 6 months, probability of you missing that forecast is 80%. So that initial curve is all important.
If you set a curve and you think this is how it's going to go, and if you are not on that curve right away, the likelihood of it being on that curve later, it's not going to come back.
It's very low, very low. So once you start, there is usually a data lag. So you start getting the sales data in about 4 to 6 weeks from the time you launch. You watch it on a weekly basis. You look at it every week. How are we doing? How is the trajectory going? So there is a lot of scrutiny on it from all angles, not just from launch success, but also from sales, from understanding, and from investors too, you know, because you launch something, you make a big press release, everybody knows it's out there, everybody's watching to see, are you going to succeed? How is it doing? So there is a lot of eyes on that one tracker that's moving up to see what's the angle. Is it close enough to what was estimated, the forecast, or is it going a little bit off? So it gets very important to track it, not just track it, but monitor it and do something about it.
What's that number you're looking at?
Usually it's like prescription data.
How many prescriptions are written for it?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Again, there are many, many different trackers. At any point, you look at around 11 different things to say,
And hopefully they all line up.
Yeah. But the main one is really prescriptions. Every company looks at, how many prescriptions are being written because it's a new product.
And that's just data you pick up through all the data firms that give that, I imagine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So something is not on the curve. What can you do about it? Or what can you try to do about it?
No, that's great questions. And these are called remediation plans. So you pull your entire launch team together again, the same folks that you pulled pre-launch, like your marketing teams, your market access teams, your medical teams, your legal, your compliance, your regulatory teams. And then you kind of go through this exercise of saying, okay, what did we plan? What happened? Where do we see patterns that are not matching? So you basically sit down and say, okay, what are all the causes? And it can be the field telling you, when we got to the office, they were saying, oh, we don't have product. And so there might be somebody else telling your physicians that, oh, they don't even have product. So then you kind of have to counter detail and say, no, we do have product. So a lot of things happen in the field. They are the ones who are actually talking to them. So you take that feedback into account. You take all the data that's coming back and you do a root cause analysis. You use templates like fishbone diagrams, where it's like a fishbone. It's like the 5 eyes. You basically say, okay, on the regulatory side, what are the things that we think did not happen the way we anticipated? It could be the label didn't end up being what we had expected. So based on that, the forecast might be wrong completely, because let's say we didn't get one of the indications we were going after, and that was a big chunk of the market. So we'll say, okay, so we need to adjust the forecast because we didn't get that. Versus, let's say, in the field, there is being some detailing or there is some counter messaging happening, then that's impacting. So we say, okay, what can we do for that? So based on these root cause analysis, you come up with an action plan to say, what can we do to fix these issues? And then you kind of prioritize and say, okay, this needs to happen first, second, third, fourth. Who is going to do it? By when? And then you have to have that loop of feedback to say, did you do it? And then again, the next week you look at the data and see, is there a trending? And again, as I initially mentioned, there's always a lag of data. So any action you take, it takes about 4 weeks to see if that action is helping or not. And so time is of essence, especially once you launch, because every little action will have some kind of an impact, good, bad, or ugly. And you want to see the right impact happening and fast.
Give me an idea of that time. So let's say something launches on the first of the year, for example. When would you get together for your first meeting if things weren't going well? And when does anything substantial come out of that, a change or something to make? Are we talking within a month or 3 months or?
It's usually 5 to 6 weeks, because that's when you start getting all the data in. You have to have data, right? You have to have facts before you start looking at things. So let's say we launched on 1st January. If I am looking at this from strategic point, I would say February 3rd week is when we all get together, look at everything that's available to say, okay, where are we going? If we are going positive, what more can we do to push it further? If we are not going positive and we are right on the, forecast line, can we still push it up? If we are low, then it becomes imperative we push it up to bring it back to where the forecast was. And that's when you come up with your action plan. Let's say we have this workshop in the 3rd week of February. We come up with the action plan, assign everybody actions, and we take those actions. Sometimes even a basic thing, let's say we say you need a marketing material so that the reps can just go and drop it. And it may take 3 to 4 weeks to develop that material. Then the rep will drop it. And then 4 weeks later, the data will show. So it can be, 8 to 10 weeks before you see the impact. Some things are very fast. It might be just, let's have a conference call with all of the field sales and then tell them that this is what we want to message. It can happen within the week and they start messaging the next week. So in 4 weeks, you can see, is that having an impact or not? So it depends on what is that action item, but it can take anywhere between 3 weeks to sometimes even 6 months.
How formal are those meetings? So when you talk about getting together, I mean, you guys aren't sitting down at lunch. I'm picturing like 12 people in a room. You've got a secretary who's capturing this, and then it goes into this official document, and then the document gets distributed, and then you all got your marching orders, and it says who you're going to report to this back and all that kind of stuff. Is it that formal?
It's usually a 4-hour workshop. And as you mentioned, you have facilitators, you have a structured workshop with agenda to say, okay, these are the 4 things that came up. What was the feedback? People will go up and also share. So it's a mix. The structure of the meeting as such is very strict to say, okay, 4 hours, these are the people that can attend. But what happens within the meeting is sometimes very informal. Like somebody will say, oh, I heard this guy, I called him up to say what's happening.
Gotcha.
And they said, this is what they're seeing. So the feedback is very informal, but the process of how we do it, how we capture the meeting minutes, the action item, and how we distribute that, and who's responsible and who do they report back to, all of that is very formal. I've been very fortunate to have extremely talented people on my team. These are program managers and launch managers who are extremely skilled. They are great at facilitation. They have subject matter expertise within the domain. So they understand what questions to ask, how to probe. These guys have done launches, so they have experience of that. So I've been very fortunate to have great team members. And so each of the launch is usually assigned to a team member, and they would do it. And as a team, we would be there supporting them, but they run the workshops. I have run some as well myself because, it all depends on how many people you need to engage with and do it. But I had a great opportunity to really work with some really good team members.
You've got people that are specialists that can run these kind of meetings.
They would manage not just these meetings, but they would manage the entire launch. So they would have the entire plan. They would be managing all the weekly meetings, the weekly updates, the reports, everything. So it definitely has a lot more than just these skills. You need to be very analytical. You need to be good with a couple of tools that we used to use, like Microsoft Project, Smartsheets. So you have different tools to track. So of course they have to have expertise in that. That was what the team was really chartered to do. We also maintained all of the, documents related to all of the launches. So we basically had a history of everything that has happened.
How many people do you have that assist you, whether they officially work for you or not?
So typically you have anywhere between 3 to 6 employees. And if you have other people helping you, in some of the companies, when you have less employees, you may have some agency helping you, and they will put another 2 or 3 people, because there's a lot of things that need to be coordinated and tracked and reported. And especially if something is, running late, you also have to start looking at the downward impact and how do we fix it. So again, it's a lot of fixing as we go. It's like, somebody had given me this analogy, right? We build a plane, we know when it needs to land, and you're building it while you're flying it. So you're putting the pieces as it flies, and by the time you land, you have to have the complete plane done. Otherwise, it's a crash.
At some point, you leave the manufacturer itself, who's doing all this. You come to Syneos, and Syneos is a huge company, right? They've got all these different functions, but one of them is helping these smaller companies do similar things that you were doing.
Yeah, so I'm part of a small group called Syneos One, which actually does lab to life. So they do everything from clinical trials all the way to commercialization. So it's a great group of people who have a lot of expertise and a lot of not just launch experience, but extensive clinical experience. They write protocols, they decide what kind of indications to go after. So it's a group of people that actually taps into Syneos as required and pulls people, the experts, to the table so we can talk through things. So it's been great learning. A lot of experts I get to meet with and work with. So it's very exciting. And this is the one chance where you get to do everything end to end, all the way from, I always use this as an example. If you're a small company and you have a great product, but let's say you're just starting out, you're really small, you have maybe 10 employees, but you have a great product, then Syneos is like the Uber. You are the passenger, you put it in the Uber, it'll take the passenger from all the way from clinical trials to commercialization and launch the product for you. It's still yours, but you don't have to buy the car, maintain the car, think about the tires or who's going to drive it. Don't have to worry about all of that, right?
It seems to me that people that come to your agency inside of Syneos, they're like a couple of mad scientists in their garage, and they say, we think we have something. They don't know they have something. They think they've invented something good, right?
Yeah, so my group actually works with small to mid-sized companies and helps them. The other groups work with big pharma as well. We work with small to mid-sized companies. Yeah.
How small?
They can be as small as 10 people with a product.
Would they already have like a patent on it or something?
You usually do, but I'm not sure. So I won't quote myself on that.
What would these companies have done in the past if they didn't have someone like Syneos, like the Uber of this stuff? Would they just go out and try to hire people? But then that would be a problem because they'd have this maybe great drug, but maybe they don't want to grow this big company.
Exactly. Maybe you don't want to get into that hiring sales reps and commercializing. Then usually those companies may license their product to a bigger company, or they may partner with somebody. They may take it all the way to the point where they can say, okay, I just want to partner with another company. But they won't have the chance to do it all the way themselves without hiring anybody.
And then they might have to sell some of their company or something like that to grow. And they might have to divest of that a little bit.
Right.
It sounds to me like after these launch, and let's say it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, and you come back and you have your meetings, does anybody ever get in trouble? It always sounds like we can always blame, like, oh, this didn't go like we thought it would, or this didn't go like we thought it would. What would a failure look like? Let's take a Syneos competitor. And let's say that one of these companies came to you and they say, we want to hire Syneos this time. And you say, why? And they say, well, the other company didn't work well for us. What would that look like? What does that mean, not working well? Because it sounds like a lot of this is mathematical, works as a system, there's creativity in it with the marketing and so on. But there's got to be a time when a company just doesn't do a good job.
A lot of it is perception, I think. A lot of times you have a vision in mind. When you hire an agency, you want your vision to come to life.
Yeah.
And you know how hard it is we've all been played the telephone game, right?
Right.
You say something, it goes through, and the end result is completely different. So sometimes it's just a question of how well did somebody interpret what your expectation was. Luckily for me, in all the years I've worked, it has always been a quest of what can we learn from what hasn't worked rather than play the blame game, because it gets you nowhere. At the end of the day, instead of wasting our energies blaming somebody, can we spend those energies on fixing what we can and make the best of the situation, right? That's been the attitude that I've always used.
I was just reading about Amazon.
Yeah.
And you saw this too with like Jack Welch with General Electric. And they on purpose would fire like the bottom
10%.
10%. And I read that and I'm like, gee, that's kind of cutthroat, but I guess companies do it. So you don't see a lot of someone saying, this failed, we're firing and we're moving on. It's more like, this didn't go as well as we thought. It's not black and white, it sounds to me.
It's not, because there's no one person responsible either. It's a group, it's a team, so it's very hard to say this one person didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And that's why it didn't happen. But I agree though, Amazon is very cutthroat from what I've heard as well. But it's different philosophies, right? How do you want to go about doing business? Like do you want to just eliminate the bottom 10%? The bottom 10 may be higher than your competitors, top 50.
Yeah, right.
But then you still want to just keep it low, then I guess that's what you do.
Who do we get to blame when there's a really silly name of a product? Who ultimately do we get to blame? If there's a drug that's just a silly name and we're like, how the hell did they think of that? Especially if there's something wrong with it, it rhymes with something. I'm imagining it goes through marketing, it goes through all this stuff. Who ultimately is the blame? Is it the CEO?
My kids ask this all the time. Mommy, how do you come up with these names? So usually there are naming agencies. And this starts, so it's a joint effort, actually not even joint, I would say it's more of a regulatory effort. They actually start the naming along with marketing. And because when you file for a product, you have to give them a name, what your proposed name is. And you give them 2 or 3 options. You usually give your primary, secondary, and tertiary names. And because they will do a search to see if it's rhyming or the colors are, similar to other products in the market. And
the FDA is doing that.
FDA does that, yes. So you have to give them options. So you come up with this, they do some research and they'll come up with names. And sometimes you kind of have some meaningful names. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're completely have no meaning, nothing to do with the product. They just have these random alphabets pulled together. But it's that agency that does the research and come up with names. So it's usually sometimes you get the name as a commercial team after the names have already been decided. So you really can't do much with it.
Who signs off on that though? Someone has to say, that's my responsibility. I hired that naming firm, or I could have said no, or who ultimately is that? Is that the CEO?
Yeah. At the end of the day, everything, the overall responsibility is with the CEO.
Yeah. All right, Divya. So with your mentoring, you're sitting down now with yourself 20 years ago. So here you are and you're talking to yourself back then. What are you telling yourself? What are you telling the younger you that you know now that you want to mentor the younger self? What are you telling her?
I would say be kind. Don't try to be nice to everybody. Because a lot of times when we go to work, we want to be known for being the good person, the friendly person. But at the end of the day, you go to do your job. You get paid to do your job, not to make friends. If you make friends in the process, great. But focus on what's important, what's the job, and say what you want to say. Don't hold back, ever.
So you're saying be kind, but don't necessarily be nice?
Yeah.
You can have a kind candor. You can say something that's important and maybe challenging or sometimes even hurtful. You can do it as kindly as you can, but that's different than being nice.
Exactly. If a feedback has to be given, give it. but say it in a way that's nice. You don't have to be nice and say, okay, I'm not going to say that because this person is going to feel bad, because you're not doing them a service by not giving them feedback when it's required.
I like that. Just today, basically, I fired our alarm company at the pharmacy that we've had them since I was a kid. And some things weren't right. And then I would call them and then they wouldn't know the answer. And they'd come out and charge me for stuff I didn't want to be charged for and this and that. And so anyways, today I sent them my 30-day letter because it was coming up in my year. So I finally fired them after all this time. One of their main sales guys is a customer at the pharmacy. So I had to think this all through. But I was just going to say, I'm done. Then I was going to say something like, thank you for the relationship or something like that. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to say something that I can live with. I'm going to say it kindly, but I'm going to say it. And what I said was, I want to make this switch because of cost reasons, and I want more control over the equipment and my monitoring. And so that's why I'm doing this. And I thought, I'm kind of proud of myself because years ago, I wouldn't have done that. And it's a long story to say there's a ton of value in what you're saying. Be kind, but make sure you say it.
And speak up. Like, you have to be yourself. You have to be true to yourself. And you have to be able to sleep at night. And that's been my mantra. Fix the problems. What cannot be fixed will wait for the next day. You can't help that. But anything in your control that can be done today, so you can sleep peacefully, get it off your chest. In a nice way.
When did you pick this up? Because I'm assuming that yourself 20 years ago may not have known this, or else you maybe wouldn't have chosen what you're telling yourself 20 years ago. You would have maybe said something else like buy Bitcoin or something like that. So it must be that maybe 20 years ago you didn't have this skill. Would that be fair?
That is fair. Great observation. Yes, I did not. I actually did not give candid feedback to people because I didn't want to hurt them. That happened a couple of times. And I think in the process, because I didn't want to blame somebody else, I took a lot on myself, whether it be work, whether it be things. I'm like, don't worry, I'll do it because you can do it. But now thinking back, I'm like, no, I should have said something. We all had our roles and responsibilities. And I don't need to do everybody else's job to make them feel better. I just need to say to them that, life happens. Big deal. Let's move on. This is what is expected of you at work. So please make sure this gets delivered, because it's not my job to fill up all the gaps. For some reason, I felt responsible for making sure everything is smooth across the board. But sometimes that's not your job. You just have to do your part and help others get theirs done. You don't have to do it for them.
You came to this realization probably through a lot of frustration.
Yeah. But the good part is, at the beginning of my career, that was me. But then I think after 5 years or so, things started changing. I started realizing I had heard a few good lectures, at which point I was like, okay, fine. It's not just me. A lot of women go through this. And now that I'm doing the Woman to Woman podcast, I kind of hear a lot of women say the same things, if you had to go back, do things differently. When they're talking about these things, I'm like, oh my God, this was me. So now in reflecting back, I think it also might have been a lot of me, but also the fact that I was a woman in workplace and things were different 20 years ago. Things have changed a lot now. But when I started like 24 years ago, it was not the same.
When you have these realizations, you can't go back and say, I wish I would have, or you can wish, but I should have. It's like, no, things were different. A lot of things were different. I go back and I think about that. It's like, well, I was in a different spot in my career. I had different spots in the business, and you just got to be thankful where you are. I sucked at that. I either smiled through it all, or I just was a son of a bitch to someone. I just let it all loose, on them and just really lay into them. Of course, bringing all of the anger from something else and pouring it on this poor soul who happens to have hit the trigger. Yeah, being kind with your candor, that's a huge thing. When you're not, you're really lying to people and you're not giving them a chance to respond to reality. Now that person can't respond to the reality because you've chosen to hide that reality. You're just creating these layers of falsehoods. It's not fair to people.
And one thing I also realized was that feedback was a gift. when I was getting constructive feedback over the years, I was able to improve myself. I was able to improve my deliverables. I was being a better person, a better professional. And now being a mentor, I realized that that's the biggest gift I can give to my mentee. Just tell them what they need to fix so they can move forward in the best way possible and be the best version of themselves. So that's important. Giving feedback is so important, and taking the feedback in the right spirit is also equally important. Take it as a gift and take it in the right spirit and see what can I get out of it? How can I improve from it?
I remember going to my doctor, and my doctor would say, you're overweight. I didn't want to accept that. I said, I want a second opinion. He said, I don't like your haircut. So, Divya, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us today. That was a lot of fun. And if I see one of those names I don't like sometime on one of those drugs, I'm going to come and ask you who was responsible for that.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Divya. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. Please subscribe for all future episodes.